Hello, my name is Keyack. I'm an expert Tekla Structures trainer and consultant, and in this video I'm going to talk about a new application that I've created for Tekla Structures that basically allows you to connect data that you've input in an Excel spreadsheet and automatically update and modify components in the Tekla model. So Excel spreadsheets are a very popular way in construction to do calculations, whether it's for design or geometry layouts, and then you can organize things in any kind of interface that you want pretty easily. And so what we want to do is we want to take this intelligence and all this data and information and drive components automatically in Tekla Structures with this information. Now we can either take the worksheet that this particular cell is on, and or we can also take the row and the column number, or we can take the actual cell value name like you see here at the upper left, and we can use those as references and map them to parameters in components over in Tekla. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how we're going to do that. So over here in Tekla Structures, we have a custom component, and if I double click on this, you'll see that its name is called Truss-6Webs. And you'll see that there's a series of parameters that I've created so I can enter in the profile for the chords and the web members, as well as a lot of the X locations along the length of the truss to position all of those web members to the chords, and then also the truss depth. So this is parametric in the sense that I could drive things directly from the dialog box, but the thing here is that I want to just read that information from Excel and tell it to automatically drive the data to the component. So let's go ahead and edit this custom component so that way you can kind of see what the parameter names are that I'm going to map to. So I'll right click and say edit custom component, and then when I go into the editor, there's the variables list, and inside of there you can see that there are these different variables or parameter names. And here I have actually named them so that way it'll make more logical sense instead of just P1 and P2 over inside of my mapping file. But the idea here is that I've just created these names, and you'll see that these are some of the profile values. Like this one here is the top chord profile. So if I actually click on that and then go underneath that part in the browser, you'll see that there is the profile property, and I added an equation here and I put in that TCP variable. So basically I like to call custom components in the variables list like this is the brains, right? This is the head of the custom component, and the brains is sending information and inputs over to the body here in the component browser, and I've essentially mapped this variable name to set the profile for the top chord. Now, I've done the same things with some of these binding distances. So here when I click on this first web member, you can see that when I click on this, it'll highlight that in the list, and that is web at the column top chord X location along the length of the truss. And then I have the bottom chord location here. So again, we've got these variables. We can set up bindings here and then also map our parameters to our actual objects in the component browser to control things like the profile. But now what we'll do is we'll close this down, and we're going to show you how to make the mapping between Excel and the components. So I'm going to go to my model folder, and then I'll go to the attribute subfolder. And here I've created this ETT file, which basically just means Excel to Tekla file. And here I've named this file exactly the same name as the custom component. Now when I open this up with Notepad, you're going to see at the very top there's this header line that basically tells you that the first column, this is just a comma delimited file, is the Excel variable name, or the cell, like the cell name, or the sheet number, and then the cell column and row index. And that's what you can see here in the column row index is separated by a colon. But here you can see that essentially I've got the sheet number, and then I put an exclamation at the end of that. And that's if you have like multiple worksheets in the same Excel like workbook. So that way you can essentially distinguish which cell are you actually pulling from in the spreadsheet that has multiple worksheets in it. But if you actually name the cells, then you can actually just reference that because that'll have that unique name there that you can put on there. Now, the second column in here is the Tekla variable name. So these are all those names or those parameter names that I was just looking at inside the custom component editor. And then we have to tell it the data type. And the three primary data types are going to be double, string, and int or integer. And so the idea is that integer would be like a number, like the quantity of something. A double is going to be something like probably like a length. And then the only reason why I have profile here instead of just string is that I'm actually converting some of the profiles, like or capitalizing some of the letters and doing some special stuff beyond it just being a string. But string is also an option here. And again, I just made a special coded profile type option so that way I can capitalize the letters and get rid of white spaces and stuff like that. And then the last column is the units that's in Excel. Here in the US, we use a lot of basically decimal inches as our base unit for input, but in the Tekla API and underneath the hood, everything is in millimeters for those length inputs. And so this inch designator for the units, that basically just tells my code to multiply the value coming from Excel by 25.4, so that way it passes it as millimeters to the actual variable in the API. But that's it. You just enter in each of the cells and in the Tekla custom component or even the system component variable name, and then the data type and the units. Now that can be either here in our model attributes folder, or we can put those into our firm folder, so that way we can keep those mappings that we do once and then just reuse those over and over again. Okay, so I created 3 new instances of the custom component, and I have all of the different values here emptied out and using the default values defined inside the custom component. And that's why the variables have basically square brackets around them. Now I did that so that way you can see that this is truly going to read every one of those fields from the Excel spreadsheet and then automatically update them. Now I want to make sure that I have select components chosen down here at the bottom of Tekla, so that way I can select and highlight the entire component. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the Excel to Component tool, and I can browse to the Excel spreadsheet that I want to read the data from. So here I'm going to just read in from the model folder, and I'll just double click on that, and it'll put the / here for the relative path of that model folder. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to simply press the Modify Components. Now one thing that's important is here within a couple seconds it automatically already fixed those and adjusted them. But one thing that's important to understand is that you want to make sure that the Excel spreadsheet is closed, because if you have the spreadsheet open in Excel, it actually makes the file read-only and not able to actually be opened. It locks the file. And so you want to make sure that the spreadsheet is closed. But here you go. Within a couple seconds, you see all of those data values from those cells are automatically mapped. And then it's come back in here and it has set all of those values inside of the custom component. Now again, this can work on custom components as well as system components, but on system components you have to find out what those variable names are, which is a little bit more tricky. You can actually kind of go look at the Excel plugin spreadsheets that were made a long time ago to kind of get those. Another way is you can actually do a save as on some components and open up the attribute files and find some of the variable names. But if you do know the variable names on your custom components or system components, you can easily map them here to Excel, and this is a little bit different than the old Excel plugin within Tekla. One of the limitations about the old Excel plugin is that it would only work on connections and details. In fact, I don't even know if it could work on details. I'd have to go back and look at that. But it wouldn't work on things like custom parts like this, where it's like a whole truss component. And so here I just wanted to make it very simple, where you map it once and you actually might have one source spreadsheet updating multiple components in the model and different types of custom components, but you have all the data in one master spreadsheet. So that's the other thing here, is I just kind of wanted to make this a little bit of a simpler process and allow you to take legacy solutions like you have in Excel and then drive data directly into Tekla.